Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from May 1st to the 7th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. Today we're going to start with a big announcement that we got on Thursday, so thank you Liz Brown-Kaiser, who covers Congress for NBC News, for breaking this, and Julie NBC News for starting the development last week, as Senate Banking Committee Chair Senator Sherrod Brown says a hearing on a bipartisan cannabis reform bill could take place as soon as May 11th, which is next Thursday. Finally taking this banking bill seriously. The SAFE Banking Act would give legal cannabis businesses access to banking services and bring about $30 million of liquidity into the banking system that the banks desperately need, and apparently they're going to move quickly on it. So we love to hear that. We did get the official link, and the official meeting or hearing was set for May 11th. Not the following week in May or kick down the road again, but May 11th, thankfully. So cheers to MJ Stock Trader for sharing this. We've been waiting many years for the Senate to get serious about the SAFE Banking Act, and May 11th we finally get our day. So link in the description if you wanted to go through it, but it'll be on Thursday, May 11th, 9:45. So very happy to have this first development. Well, we got this story out of Anchorage Daily News as Alaska's U.S. Senators join push to protect banks serving cannabis businesses. Well, it's great that we got the news of the hearing scheduled for May 11th. Now, the reality is it could be a long time from May 11th until SAFE actually passes. Now, they said they're going to act quick. Obviously, we want to take their word, but it's not wise to trust any politicians based on what they say. Trust their actions. So at least we're going to be acting on it. But all this to point out that it could take a long time. And so from my understanding, the good news is that there's only one committee necessary, and then they might be able to just get SAFE on the floor for vote. And if that's the reality, this is good news to add along with it, as Sullivan says he sees Republican opposition to SAFE banking shrinking. And if we need 10 Republican votes to pass SAFE, alone as it is, this makes our odds even better. When more states legalize cannabis, he said, those senators get quickly interested. Now, I've been saying for a while, and I did believe that we actually did have the votes to get SAFE passed a while ago. It's just up to Schmuck, and he has not put it on the floor for vote. I could be wrong, that's just my opinion, but clearly more Republicans on board makes the odds of SAFE passing as a standalone vote simpler, just like that, sooner than later. He said that a states' rights argument has also been compelling to Republican senators who support the 10th Amendment, which confers rights not explicitly granted to the federal government in the Constitution. And so if any point you were concerned that SAFE might not pass because of a lack of Republican votes in the Senate, chances are that is no longer a valid argument. So other good news, we got a Maryland governor signs cannabis regulation bill into law with sales set to begin July 1st. And so that's less than 2 months away. Adult use sales will launch and commence in Maryland. So more on the full story if you wanted to grab the link in the description, but I just want to bring you down mostly to the meat and potatoes. Here's an overview of the Maryland cannabis regulation law. Cannabis will be taxed at 9%, a little higher than some other states, not ideal, but less than others proposed, while medical cannabis sales will be exempt from the tax. And so 35% of cannabis tax revenue will go towards some of what is listed in this paragraph. And then to scroll down, a new independent cannabis administration will be responsible for regulating the program. Hopefully they're not as incompetent as New York and New Jersey. Existing medical cannabis dispensaries will be converted into dual licensees at the same time, so existing med will get a head start, which is positive for any existing operators. That legalization takes effect on July 1st if they've paid a fee. Regulators will need to start approving additional cannabis business licenses by July 1st, 2024, so they get a year head start for sales. Ultimately, there will be a licensing cap for 300 dispensaries, 100 processors, 75 growers. For small micro businesses, there will be a limit of 10 dispensaries, 100 processors, and 100 growers. And so I believe $5 million is the fee. Yes. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read, but just wanted to highlight not all beneficial, as of course Maryland is a more leftist state focusing on social equity experiment that we're seeing out of states. And so hopefully it doesn't go bad as New Jersey and as New York or Illinois. But good luck, Maryland. Good to see this signed and having this go into effect. And so with that, from Raw Story, highlighting Missouri cannabis sales top $350 million during the first 3 months of legalization. Don't say they're not happy that they didn't reform their cannabis laws. So Missouri is on fire. Just figured I would show you some parts of it. You can pause to read if you're interested in the story. But main takeaways, Missouri's rec cannabis sales came in at $91 million for April, according to a report the state released on Friday. That's up from February's $71.7 million and on par with March's $93.5 million. And so seems this year we're seeing the biggest spike in March, and then of course another strong month following in April for 420. But for whatever reason, it seemed like when spring came early, people just wanted to spend that really nice first weekend we got in March. I don't know, we had one here. I don't know if you guys had one, but for a total of $256 million for the first 3 months. Damn! Adding in medical cannabis sales, which have shrunk because obviously cannabis is just legal at a store, so you don't need to go to a doctor to get your medicine. Missouri hits $350 million in the first 3 months since the state has been able to sell. And so a bit more here if you wanted to pause, read, of course, full story. Grab the link in the description. Well, we did get recent data from Illinois as their adult use cannabis monthly sales figures are out, updated from May 2nd, 2023. And so sales for April, we saw more items sold in April than March, 3.3 million up from 3.2, while in-state resident sales fell by about 2 million, likely going to Missouri, ironically, and then out-of-state resident sales fell from 33.7 to 32.4 million for total sales in April of 131.9 million, down a little bit from March where we saw 134.7, but still a nice jump up from February, which is typically the lowest sales month in a year. But take a look at this. From April last year, out-of-state resident sales was 40.8 million, meaning people that did not live in Illinois came and spent 8 million more on cannabis last year than they did this year, likely because Missouri is an option that's now legal and cheaper than Illinois. So interestingly enough, good to see those citizens of Illinois still voting for legal cannabis with their dollars. But hey, remember those 185 extra social equity dispensaries that were supposed to be open from, say, January to April? Paging those dispensaries, hello, where the hell are you, Illinois? It would be great. And so keep in mind, these are strong sales without those extra 185. If those can get online, I mean, hopefully they have been getting online. We just haven't been told about it. But hopefully I can get some update on that eventually from some news story. But with that, out of Florida Office of Medical Cannabis Use, looking at this past week, no new dispensaries are approved. Fair enough, makes that easy for me. Qualified patient count did jump up to 814,965, which represents a weekly increase of 2,021 week over week. So nice to see more patients getting access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative in Florida. And so with that, we got all the data, dispensations from April 28th to May 4th. We got all the MSOs, the number of active dispensaries they have, and then for this past week alone, the number of milligrams of THC sold, milligrams of CBD sold, and ounces of smokable flower. And so I do keep tabs on this data week by week, but thank you connoisseurs.io as well for making this easily digestible with a nice visual as he tracks the data. Florida's OMMU weekly update for April 28th to May 4th, 2023. Trulieve, no doubt, maintains number 1 spot in THC and flower, number 2 in CBD, while Curaleaf back to the number 2 spot in THC and flower, although Air Wellness is neck to neck with them on THC, and Verano Brands is neck to neck with Curaleaf on flower. So very competitive, to say the least. Total flower sales, ounces by company. This is the visual, and so of course grab the link if any of this is blocked off. But Trulieve number 1, Muv, Verano number 2, Air Wellness number 3, Curaleaf number 4 there. Total THC sales, Trulieve number 1, Muv, again, Verano number 2, Air Wellness number 3, Curaleaf number 4. And then total CBD sales, Trulieve number 1, Verano number 2, Curaleaf number 3, Certera Wellness number 4, and then a lot more competitive with smaller shares there with total dispensing locations by company, and Trulieve massively leading the way. But with that, from High Times, thank you for sharing this one, as cannabis sales in Vermont hit record high in February. And interesting to see, some states are much slower at tracking and counting their data than others, right? And so we're only getting February data out of Vermont at this time, but from May 4th, happy to share that Heedy, Vermont reports that sales that month amounted to 6.4 million, which also represents a slight uptick in rate of sales growth, around 6.9% from January to February. And so interestingly enough, like in Illinois, most states we see January sales stronger than February, but for whatever reason in Vermont, February sales jumped up from January, probably just because the access to legal cannabis and the popularity of it. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read, and then I'll bring you down to this last bit in case you wanted to read, so you don't have to grab the link, of course. Otherwise, link is in the description. But with that, Green Thumb Industries reports their first quarter 2023 results, and they do not disappoint, as they are the only MSO right now capable of producing cash flow from operations. And so highlights for the first quarter ended March 31st, 2023. I'm just going to go through the highlights, as the revenue increased 2% year over year to $249 million. And so given all the circumstances, operating with both hands tied behind their backs, the predatory 280E tax, New Jersey and New York going about as badly as it possibly could, as opposed to going well, I'd say it's impressive. And GAAP net income of positive $9 million, or 0.4 cents a share. Again, we're not used to seeing this, but this is what makes Green Thumb one of the leaders, despite having a smaller footprint and not as much growth potential as some of the others. Adjusted EBITDA was $76 million, or 31% of revenue. Cash flow from operations of $75 million in the first quarter. Good job, Green Thumb. And then cash at quarter end total $185 million. And so management commentary, you can pause to read here if you're interested. First quarter 2023 financial review, pause to read a little bit. So last bit, you can pause to read. Otherwise, if you're invested in green thumb or if you're interested in learning more, grab the link in the description to dive through a little more deeply. But with that, thank you, Cannavestment, who is an early investor in green thumb and many of the other MSOs, but has that financial background and kindly shares his due diligence with us. As steady as she goes for green thumb in Q1, while revenue was slightly behind consensus, margin profile and cash flow were both ahead. Strong profitability and a lean BS continue to prove valuable as GTI continues to put money into the business organically while others are pulling back. And so less expansion, more reinvesting, and seems to be paying off for them. And so here you can read more on green thumb from Cannavestment, while Curaleaf to report their first quarter 2023 financial and operational results on May 17th. And so while we just got their fourth quarter in my midweek update video, link should be in the description, good to see them already announcing that they've got Q1 lined up for May 17th after the market closed. So we will be looking out for that. And also just wanted to share this interesting article that I found from Cannabis Business Times. Curaleaf's Boris Jordan says new super PAC will sway safe banking's passage in 2023. So he sounds confident in that title. Then the company's executive chairman provided a timeline for the bill during an earnings call, but said he's not predicting anything in Washington. So it sounds less confident with that next statement. But all that to say, wanted to bring you down to this. There's a lot here, especially if you're invested in Curaleaf, worth reading. But Jordan called the reintroduction a symbolic and important gesture of SAFE and other cannabis bills that to me shows a willingness and a commitment to getting much needed federal reform across the finish line. Again, we'd love to hear this because we've been led on for about 2.5 years now, and no doubt passing sound policy makes sense because if you don't pass it, the problem just exacerbates. But he also revealed that there will be an unprecedented financial clout behind safe banking this year, notably from industry advocacy organization U.S. Cannabis Council, which announced April 27th it had named Ed Conklin as a former director, or as an executive director. And what's notable is that prior to joining, Ed apparently spent 2 decades as the chief of staff for global government relations at McDonald's Corp. So he's got experience, and this gives Boris Jordan reason to believe that we might get safe sooner than later. But Jordan did, however, lay out a potential 2023 timeline for safe banking's passage, beginning with the Senate's passage in July, the House's passage in the fourth quarter, and a signature from President Joe Biden in December. That is the target, he said, apparently. And so a little bit more here if you wanted to pause to read, just for what it's worth, so you don't have to grab the link. Otherwise, definitely an interesting read to go through. And so with that, wanted to share some snippets from investment firms. So thank you, Sammy J, for providing this one. From Stifel, interesting Stifel graph note today on how federal reform catalysts impact MSO share prices. For better or worse, we have seen that movement, however small, on federal cannabis reform in the U.S. influences company share prices, no doubt. And Wall Street knows all that matters is some sort of incremental reform at this point, but a quick look at how federal reform catalyst impacted MSO share prices in the past. Now, just keep in mind, though, it is true that while these MSOs, their valuations were, a couple billions, and they were at their peak share price-wise, and again, temporarily on the scoreboard, they were doing about half of the revenue that they are doing now. That's true, which is wild. But of course, the sooner you can cut costs and become profitable, that actually makes you an attractive investment, right? But just wanted to point that out. And so if this isn't the definition of discrepancy in value and potential opportunity, I don't know what is. The hard part is always just finding the right timing. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Clearly now, sooner than later. But Todd Harrison sharing this one as well from U.S. Cannabis, Jeffries, and that last one was from Stifel. So again, take these with a grain of salt because they've been wrong in the past, but no doubt, obviously, this momentum that we're seeing now is promising. A SAFE this time could finally be different. Really positive developments around SAFE. Additional developments since introduction have made us more optimistic, as it's made us as well. But again, plan accordingly for your own situation and assessing these new developments from an investment perspective. And so you can pause to read or grab the link if you wanted to read a little bit more clearly. While some more state news, Benzinga Cannabis shares that Washington State Governor Jay Inslee signed a bill that would allow interstate cannabis commerce. Very interesting. So this bill is now in play in Washington, but keep in mind that bill, which was passed by the Washington legislature in April, will only go into effect once federal policy changes are made to allow for the transfer of cannabis across state lines. Now, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but would this become applicable if cannabis is moved from Schedule 1 and rescheduled to a Schedule 3? Now, again, I want cannabis descheduled completely, but I don't think we're going to get everything that we want at once, and we have to get there incrementally. And so if it is moved to a Schedule 3, does this then go into play? Because we've seen more states do this, and I think that's some telling foreshadowing, and hopefully we get some announcement from HHS or from Garland, the DOJ, and a Garland memo 2.0. But so this link will be in the description if you wanted to read through it. Just wanted to share that. Well, thank you, Tom Engel, as Rep LBR, who's Lisa Blunt Rochester. And Nancy Mace filed a bipartisan bill that would automatically seal criminal records for certain federal cannabis convictions. It sounds promising, but then what the hell was Biden's clemency announcement for? Because no doubt most arrests do happen at the state level, and this is a good initiative, especially for non-violent drug offenders to be released, as they should never have been locked up in the first place. And so a bit more on this if you wanted to pause to read why they're introducing it, no doubt, so less people are affected with unnecessary criminal charges. But essentially the bill would establish a new process for people to petition the courts for record sealing for non-violent offenses that aren't eligible for automatic sealing. And I imagine that's more related to prison and at the federal level than state level and jails. That's probably where more possession charges are versus at the federal level. So hopefully this just helps give more people their life back, which I imagine is the goal. More on the story if you wanted to grab the link down low. Time for our weekly laugh out of New York. And you might be wondering, what has the Office of Cannabis Management come up with this week as a potential solution to all of the problems that they themselves have caused? And well, this time, New York's first licensed and legal delivery cannabis service is now open for business, because if you cannot find the 4 or 5 legal dispensaries that are probably 3 or 4 times as expensive as the 2,000 illicit outlets all over the place, why not pay extra and tack on more charges in the form of delivery, right? You cannot make this shit up. So a new New York cannabis industry means innovative business models and opportunities for New York. Hey, how about getting Safe Pass 2.5 years ago and having provided those social equity entrepreneurs with the actual opportunities that you'd promised, as opposed to equity and equal outcomes for everybody, making everyone who wanted to follow the legal rules equally poor. As it is certainly not the American way and no way to treat your citizens, but apparently they have come up with new legislation to try and curb their illicit problems. As better late than never, New York's legislation to curb illicit cannabis sales, published as of May 5th, so fairly new. What's included in this new cannabis legislation? I'm just going to point this out here and pause to read. And so hopefully this can help curb all that, but at the same time, the longer that they haven't acted, they've got a lot of work to do. And so more here if you wanted to read what New York is proposing to tackle their illicit problem that they have created based on their unfortunate backwards policies. But with that, thank you, Hirsch Jane, for highlighting another unfortunate reality we see out of these very blue states. Illinois cannabis tax revenue is second highest in the U.S. behind California. And now, as a Canadian, I am no stranger to paying taxes, mainly because I grew up in a socialist system without even realizing it. But in the past, I didn't mind as long as I felt like I was getting my money's worth for the services provided, and if I felt that I could trust the government with allocating the taxes properly. Now, I don't think many of us can trust our governments doing that at all. And then when you add inflation into the mix, simply caused by our government's printing more money, inflation is a tax. And so while they can just print more money and then dilute the value of our existing dollars, then why on earth can they keep charging us income tax? There's nothing more infuriating. And so just thank you for bringing this up, Hirsch Jane, because it essentially highlights that these very leftist states like California and Illinois, with the high taxes that they're starting off as, it's just a money ploy for the state. And it's unacceptable, especially in America, because Illinois per capita spend on cannabis is $150 per resident. It's the second lowest of any mature adult use, meaning, obviously the taxes are scaring people away from spending more. Hence, we're hearing more people going from Illinois to Missouri because of lower taxes. Behind California, $135 per resident. I don't know about you, but the older you get and the more money that you earn yourself, the less tax you want to pay to an irresponsible government that's just going to piss it away. And so just highlighting California, Illinois taking big share of artificially small pie. The pie's small because the state is designed it that way so that they can take a big share. So it's fascinating. More on the story if you wanted to grab the link, but thank you for pointing that out, Hirsch. It's just, the states like Missouri, Arizona that are not focused on social equity, clearly leading the American way in the state-led growth story, as opposed to these states shooting themselves in the foot. And so with that, thank you, Tom Engel, for sharing Pennsylvania lawmakers filed new bills to legalize cannabis sales through a system state run stores, interesting approach, and to provide permits for farmers to cultivate cannabis. And so still very early, but happy to see that out of PA, as it'd be another state with a larger population that we'd like to see go, that's been successful for medical. But more on this story, link in the description if you wanted to read through it. And so with that, from Minnesota Reformer, cannabis legalization, what's different in the House and Senate bills? So I do believe while Minnesota is on track to get their legalization launched and going, they do have to fix the discrepancy between bills, apparently. So I found this article from Minnesota Reformer, just figured I would share it for what it's worth if you're interested. And so you can pause to read a little bit more, and then on possession amounts, what discrepancies will be fixed. And then we've got taxes, civil penalties if you wanted to pause to read. And then the last bit, it's a blue state. So, of course, they're going to try some social equity backwards approaches that are going to shoot themselves in the foot. Of course, social justice would be descheduling the plant, so no one can be criminalized anymore unfairly. That is just common sense. I don't know why I mean, obviously government doesn't want to give up control. We know why, but local control and nuisance actions, last bits you can pause to read it if you're interested. So with that, some studies before we head off. Thank you, Tom Engel, for sharing this one. Now, I've shared many studies that say this, but just relaying more data to shut the prohibitionists up. Love to see it as a new federal study from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that high school student cannabis use was trending up from 2009 to 2013 before legal cannabis dispensaries started opening, but has been on the decline since then. Boom! Love to see it. And so happy to have another one, a bit more ammunition. And so unfortunately, you can't necessarily see what it says here, but cannabis increased 2009 to 2013, decreased 2013 to 2021. So you can't see that part here. Alcohol, no change. Still easy as ever for kids to get, no doubt. And 40% of crime caused by alcohol. I wonder why politicians don't want to talk about or address that. Big alcohol lobby. And so next one, of course, link in the description if you want to go through that. Well, thank you, Marijuana Kamau, for sharing this. You don't say. Cannabis Consumer Report collected data from 3,926 consumers across the U.S., and results show that most users report overall happiness at 79% and 63% report being more social. What do you know? Counterintuitive? Not really for cannabis users. We experience this every day. Generally why our lives are great. But all that to say, high praise. Cannabis users credit the plant for boosting their mental health. If only we know the mainstream media could never go with this angle, but just imagine they opened up to the reality of this plant. If you have any self-control and can use it in moderation, and coming from NBC of all places. And even better is that cannabis consumers also said their usage will only increase or remain the same for the next 12 months. If it's making your life better, again, everything in moderation. But why would you cut it out completely or criminalize people for it? How do people still want people criminalized? It makes no sense. And they literally think this is a dangerous drug. Can you imagine living in that delusion? And additionally, nearly 1 in 2 users report they use it every day, and if an employer required regular drug testing, it would influence them to quit or not apply. People use Advil every day. You can use cannabis in the same sense. Again, moderation is everything. The plant is not only being used for mental health, but for PTSD and chronic pain. And then just, highlighting some more. Sadly, that bipartisan bill that would have helped veteran research did get blocked, but the reality is that the study don't lie. 78% says cannabis helps their mental health. And with that, Cannavestment.io, thank you for sharing this one. As with the Safe Banking Act hearing set in the Senate, is now more important than ever to keep the pressure going and let our senators and representatives know where we stand. And I do believe this is very important because the more pressure, the sooner we can actually see this done. And so thank you, Cannavestment.io, for raising the awareness and joining the fight on Twitter and this cannabis community that we have slowly but surely growing as more people become aware and educated to the unfortunate history, all the propaganda, and how we about fixing that going forward. And so the link, I'll be in the description, cannabisincommon.org. Actually, when it's one of the few issues that most Americans can actually agree on, a very useful tool for any election, and nice to see Rise here. Thank you for the advocacy green thumb. So are your senators on board? You can select here to find out if your senators are on board with ending federal cannabis prohibition. And then they make it easy. Your voice matters. 1, 2, 3 easy steps to reach out. And again, just say, please pass the Safe Banking Act to make America safer, get the cash off the streets, and treat cannabis businesses like any other American business, as the discrimination for cannabis ought to stop sooner than later. Make sure you opt out of these so you don't get annoying emails, but please make your voice heard. If you are American and you've helped before and you're a viewer of my channel, thank you so much. It's days like this that I wish I was American and that I can help. But now more than ever, folks, as we have our first vote scheduled for next week, Thursday, we'll update you as we move along. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I'll catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.